Welcome to Curious Coaching, the Sport Northern Ireland podcast for coaches who are driven to explore new ways, thirsty for new ideas, and passionately curious about how they can maximise the power of sport through great coaching. The podcast that seeks not to answer coaching questions, but to provoke them.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Curious Coaching Podcast with your hosts, Michael Cook and Simon Toole. With us today on our episode, we have Ciaran and Chloe Cowen Vickers, both of who currently work on the Northern Ireland pathway for Judo. Both are former Olympians and highly esteemed coaches, and we're delighted to have them with us today to talk about their perspectives and insights into coaching, their learning experiences, what's making them curious, and their journeys into coaching. We do have a few technical issues on the audio, but if you can bear with us on this episode, there's some fantastic insight into both coaches and their experiences. We hope you enjoyed listening to the Curious Coaching Podcast so far, and we're absolutely looking forward to sharing another episode with you today.
Chloe, Ciaran, you're really welcome to the Curious Coaching Podcast. Jumping straight into it, Chloe, do you want to give us a little bit of a background about your coaching, how you got into coaching? I know you've come through maybe an athlete route as well, so just give us a little bit of a background to your journey into coaching.
Yeah, I kind of fell into coaching naturally after finishing judo, and it was actually I'd started taking my daughter to a judo club, and they'd asked us to would I be interested in going on the mat and helping out, and I kind of jumped to it because I felt like it was a natural thing for us to do. I'd been out of judo just for a short time, maybe a couple of years, and that's how I got into it initially. And once people knew I was back on the mat doing some coaching, I got invited to some British national squad trainings to help. And then worked with some of the junior and the cadet squads on and off for some time. I've always coached like within a club setting, and then had some time working with British Judo as a technical officer. So I was delivering coaching courses and things like that, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. I still wanted to be working in performance, and I did get the opportunity to do that off and on, but it was just getting too difficult with my job. And I think the job itself I was doing at the time, it didn't suit me, and I kind of fell out of working with British Judo at the time and went on to do a university degree in physio. I thought I needed a complete redirection from judo, but I never left coaching. I always coached in clubs throughout that time, and kind of luck had it, there was an opportunity for us to apply for a job in Northern Ireland with Ciaran. So obviously I jumped to that, and that's where I've been since then. But I've always had connections with my club, and I've always coached during the week as well at home.
So Chloe, who is it that you're coaching at the minute then within the Northern Ireland programme, or the types of athletes that you're coaching?
Well, it's the high performance athletes on the programme who I coach in Northern Ireland. So that's my main job. And obviously at home I work with athletes. I live in Newcastle in the UK, so I coach in a club environment. And a lot of those kids are on the British team as well over here.
Brilliant. No, it's a familiar story in some ways and different in others around, I suppose, kids getting through into coaching through your kids and through previous performance and stuff as well. So thanks for that. Ciaran, I suppose same question to you. We'd be fairly familiar with yourself, Michael and I, but for anybody that's listening, do you want to give them a little bit of background around the coaching you do, who it is you coach, and how you ended up there?
Okay, so I'm the performance lead for Northern Ireland Judo and the performance director for the Irish Olympic programme. I never thought I'd be a coach. In fact, I remember my father ran our club and was adamant in my last couple of years of competing that he should be ready because I'm not going to take over the coaching role at the club. And I actually started coaching primarily to make a living. So I started a schools program as soon as I finished competing after the Atlanta Games. And it was only when a few talented kids came across the school program that really spiked my interest and whet the appetite for getting back into some kind of competitive coaching. And it was a group of athletes in the late 90s when they were only 8 and 9 years old. Lisa Kearney being one of them, Keegan Thompson, who all went on to compete for Ireland for years. So it was when they started coming into the school program and just seeing some genuine talent like that, and just I ended up doing exactly what I said I would never do.
And still there?
Still here, yeah.
Still here. And what's the priority for you at the minute around the coaching, Ciaran? Who are you looking after at the minute, and what's on the horizon?
Well, of course, the Olympics has been put off for another year. We were sitting pretty with 2 certain qualifiers and one player just 1 place off. Nathan Burns was part of the Northern Ireland programme and positioned very well to qualify for Tokyo. But so we have another year of that, and there's a lot of uncertainty regarding that too, because we're still waiting on the International Judo Federation's calendar. But we have athletes in the Olympic programme, those in the Paris 24 programme, the likes of Joshua Green, who won a couple of continental medals last year, Callum Mensch, James Reid, the Hawk sisters. So we've about 15 athletes in the programme, 8 of them either an Olympic or Commonwealth Games programme.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ciaran. So it's been great to get sort of a potted history from you both there. And obviously the name of the podcast, it always leads us to the same sort of first question. The first proper question of the podcast is around curiosity. We are always quite keen to find out what it is that the coaches who come along to speak to us in the podcast are thinking about at the minute in terms of their own coaching or who they're working with. And we tend to get a whole range of different answers here. But Chloe, within your coaching at the minute, is there anything that you're thinking about? I want to find out a little bit more about that, or it's something that I just want to spend a bit more time on?
Well, I think when we went into lockdown during this time, I think things kind of fell off a cliff in a way. And I mean, for me, working obviously with the Northern Ireland programme, I couldn't travel, so that kind of got stopped. But at home, obviously, I had to keep the athletes that I have in my programme, who were really the ones who were involved in the squad system. I had to keep them going. So it was unfortunate, but we managed, obviously, online Zoom sessions and wrote programmes for them to do at home. I had to learn some new skills, stuff like that. That was probably, it's been difficult, and to be fair, now it's a bit monotonous where we're desperate to get on the mat, and I can't start my club back here because we haven't got a building to do it in, because we're based in a college. But obviously with the UK restrictions for clubs, we just can't do it. So that's one thing it's going to be interesting going back to see this long period off, and when they haven't been on the mat actually doing judo, because it's such a the skill set that you need and what it develops. They're going to miss a lot of that. So it's obviously, I'll obviously work with Ciaran on this, because he's been working with the athletes a bit sooner than me, of how they're reacting to it, going back onto the mat. But as for judo, I think for judo itself, it continuously changes. Judo rules change a lot, but you see so much in the technical side of it, so much different things coming in from different countries. And I think that's what interests me in judo, that it's kind of a cliche thing that it's a martial art, judo, but I've never saw it as a martial art. I always saw it as an Olympic sport, but there is an art to it, and I think it's the technical side of it that really drives me, keeps me interested in.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chloe. Do you think there's anything from that lockdown period and that remote aspect of coaching, anything that you'll keep when we get back to working without restrictions again, or just back to normal after that?
I don't know. I think the one thing that it made us realise about my coaching was that I have developed good relationships with athletes, and because I've done that already, they've bought into still seeing like that face contact with each other and with me, and I don't know, it's like a mutual respect from each other that we've had, where I've managed to keep them interested and focused on we're still going to have something to come back with. I think it's just that personable aspect of coaching that I don't know, I think I do well myself, so that's something that probably I'll take forward and I don't know, appreciate a little bit more from it.
Brilliant. We definitely want to come back to that personal strength a little bit later in the conversation. Ciaran, for you, anything at the minute when you're looking across your programs or how you coach or what you coach that you're thinking, actually, I'd just like to have a little bit more of a look at that?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces there. There's the systemic piece, when you're talking about how you're actually supposed to building a system right across the top pathway, and when you're really drilling down into exactly what it is you're trying to develop, the competencies, the benchmarks you're trying to hit, the experiences you're trying to bring people through, how you create environments for people to learn. That big piece, we did a large piece of work that Chloe was involved with a few years ago, and we're delivering that now. But that's like Judo, that's continually evolving, so that's always something that is required. When you think about the program as a three-legged stool, you need to know what the profile and what the competencies are that you're trying to develop. You then need to know how to develop those competencies and the experiences to the environment, and then how you deliver on a day-to-day basis. And that's, you take one of those legs away and the program falls down. So drilling down into that requires a lot of work and a lot of time, and that's a constant piece of work that is always evolving. So that's something that I'm continually curious about and trying to develop. Within that, then, some specific things crop up. There was a bit of research led by British Judo and Clan Roberts notes, and for a Judo geek like yourself, or Chloe, I'm sure you won't mind me saying, it was a great read because it looked at not just competitive benchmarks, but socioeconomic, environmental, siblings, education. It looked at a whole broad church of influences on setting top athletes really. And one piece that kept cropping back was that resilience piece. People who've been through some real hardship. So there's an area of work there around that post-traumatic growth that I'm very interested in, and I'd actually plan to do a bit of work on post-Olympics now, but it's going to be shelved for another year. So I think there's something in that we recognise but we don't fully understand, and I'd really like to get a bit deeper in that.
Brilliant, thank you, Ciaran.
So guys, just moving on from what you're curious about, very interested to hear about your learning experiences as coaches up to this point. And obviously when we speak to a lot of coaches, they talk about potential mentors or people who've guided them along their path to becoming the coach they are today. Question to Chloe, first of all, have you experienced learning through mentorship or being guided by someone who's really helped you along your path?
I think throughout my judo career, I had a lot of really influential coaches. Obviously, I think in the time when, late 80s and through the 90s, when I was competing, I think there was obviously a lot of coaches or coaching styles that were hard. It was just quite brutal, whereas obviously we don't coach like that anymore, and we don't need to. So obviously you look back at your own career and saw what was right and what was wrong, and you kind of look at the coaches who had a real positive effect on you. So obviously I've had that, and then obviously through my own time coaching, I've been lucky to work with some fantastic coaches as well. I mean, I'll always say I love working with Ciaran. because he allows us to coach, and that's something that I've had the other side too as well, the way you feel like you kind of can get dampened down a little bit. It really is a male-dominated sport as well, so there's obviously there's areas there that can be difficult, but yeah, I've had some fantastic. I mean, if I can name names, I've worked a lot with Neil Adams, and Neil Adams is our most successful judo athlete ever in Great Britain, and he's really widely respected in the world. And for me, I love having any feedback from him, and so I've worked closely with him, and yeah, and Ciaran as well, because Ciaran obviously gave us the opportunity to work on a high performance program as well, but I love being on the mat as well with other good coaches, and just learning from them, because obviously you don't ever stop learning as a coach, and I think it's just really getting to have positive relationships with players, and I think that's when you get the best out of them, and obviously with people you work with as well.
In terms of learning preferences, a lot of coaches that we talk to, they'll like to learn in different ways and use different methods. Some will, like to watch videos, read books. Others will like to learn in situ. How do you learn best, or what's your preferred method of learning?
Well, definitely from video, because it's massive now in judo. You can get on any international tournament, you can look at any fighter, so there's that side of it. I mean, as well, learning even on just day to day, even on the mat, international competitions, training camps, things like that, you're constantly learning. But I think having the conversations with other coaches as well, I think that's one way. But I do absolutely just love my sport, so I can sit and get immersed in watching judo, and understanding and working out how things work, and then working out how to develop them within our own practice. Yeah, I think that's probably is. We're lucky now in judo. Obviously, in our time, we didn't have as much competition, and we didn't have. Even though I did use video analysis, on a VHS recorder, but now it's just a flick of a switch and it's there for you. We are lucky now.
Yeah, and you obviously had the risk in those days of somebody recording their favourite TV show over your coaching video.
Yeah. Yeah, luckily, yeah, I can't see any of my fights anymore, because my dad has a load of VHS videos, no VHS player to play them on.
Brilliant, thank you. And Ciaran, just back to that first part of the question, in terms of your pathway, how have you been supported along by mentors or people who have maybe helped you develop, or is that the case?
I've been very fortunate in terms of the CPD opportunities that I have been afforded both by Sport NI and Sport Ireland, in particular the Pursuit of Excellence programme, and before that by Business Development programme. So there's been an element of professional development that I've been involved with for 10, 12 years now, pretty much ongoing and constant. So it is good, because when you're heavily involved in a programme, there isn't time to do anything else. I think when you're on the programmes that are provided by the Sport Ireland, the Sport NI, you have to go. And it's only when you get there that you realise I actually need to be there. You get too tied up in the day-to-day delivery, and you just can't see the wood from the trees, and sometimes you really do need to. And also, in particular in Irish judo, and it's great to have Chloe and Paul and Gordon and people working with us. But for a lot of the last 20 years, it's been on my own. So it has been good to be able to access a peer community. You need to realise that the challenges that you are facing are the same challenges right across all the sport. So that was very valuable. Some elements of that learning has been excellent and very challenging. others, I forget about. But that's, that's part of the course when you're doing all these courses and being able to extract as much as you possibly can from it. But it's only beneficial if there is real challenge in it, and that definitely has been the case. So, there's been some formal learning, a lot of experiential, and the way we're set up with the review process and stuff that we have, there is a lot of self-examination, a lot of self-awareness how you deliver. But just touching on something that Chloe made, and why it's such a valuable part of our program, it's also about those conversations and those relationships that you build with the athletes primarily and the other coaches. Something that I have learned, that once you have developed a certain level of competency as a coach in terms of your technical and tactical awareness and how you deliver, and that's crucial that you have that initially. But after that, it's really just about knowing your athletes and developing an authentic relationship with your athletes to know them well and what is best for them. And only by having these conversations and having that kind of relationship are you ever going to be able to get the best from anyone. So I think, that can't be overlooked when we're talking about learning practices. I think we learn at least as much from our athletes as we do from any other.
That's a really interesting point, and I think you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of things we can quantify in terms of, if it's physical fitness testing or if there's certain techniques and the statistics that come with the sport. The one bit that's really hard to quantify is things like the psychological and relationship elements that the coach and the athlete engage in.
Yeah, thanks. And I think one of why it's so important, maybe not particularly in judo, but some sports, your career may not be that long, but if you're going to be a judo player, you're going to be on the field for about 10 years. So you need to be able to build that kind of relationship with an athlete that your career is going to sustain. And that's why it has to be authentic, because you can find out, and it's not working out anyway, in my opinion. But you really have to know your athlete well. And you have to, open yourself to continually challenge yourself to be better for that athlete. I would suggest in the wrong business if you're not going to do that.
Grant, thanks, Ciaran. So this is probably, I think, and on all the episodes we've done so far, it's probably been the hardest question for coaches. So sort of set you up for that. But we've been asking coaches about what they think is the strongest thing about their own coaching. And often when we talk to coaches, the easier question for them is, what are the areas that you're really working on? Because coaches by nature like to work on areas for improvement. But Chloe, starting with you, and you had sort of touched on, and not to point you in any one direction with your answer, but you touched on this a little bit earlier on one aspect that it could be anyway, when you had talked about your sort of personal relationships and things. Is that where you think your biggest coaching strength would be, or are there other areas you think that actually that's where I'm strong?
I don't know. I don't know if there's a natural point of my coaching where I am strongest, but I like to think that I'm good at understanding what the player needs, and within the environment they're in. Whether that's understanding or reading them, whether they're in training, whether they're tired, or there's an area where they need pushing more. I just think it's generally understanding the player that I always feel that I know, and I think that just comes down to experience of being a former athlete and also being involved in coaching for a long time in different areas, because I've come through, I didn't have an opportunity to come straight into coaching as an athlete at a high level, I would say, because I had family. I lived in the northeast. I couldn't get to apply for full-time jobs and things like that. So I've had to work within grassroots judo and club judo, where you get to form relationships and see athletes grow from being young. And I think that's given me like a wider scope of coaching through to high performance, because you understand obviously the backgrounds, where they're coming from and what they need at certain times of development. Obviously, because of the technical side of judo, I sometimes can see or feel what needs developing as well. So I think that's an area that I really, I think it's like you said, it's what I enjoy doing. So it's the mat work I enjoy doing, but also I think, yeah, I can feel or just really get a good relationship with the athlete to know what they need at that time.
Yeah. Absolutely, sounds critical as well, even from what Ciaran was chatting about before around that authenticity in the relationship. Well, you can't really have that unless you've got the strengths that you've just chatted through. Is there something you're thinking on within your own coaching at the minute you would see as a work on?
I think I understand more now by working in high performance over a period of time, that your way isn't always the right way. Other people have completely different opinions on how to do things, but I think working with Ciaran, I think we'll have the same kind of ethos of what's really important in our sport, so that helps me with my coaching, and that's what drives us. But I think, yeah, just the one thing is being a little bit more understanding, or sitting back and listening to what other people's opinions are, because they can be so different, and understanding, why people are practicing or doing things the way they are.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chloe. I'm sure that'll be a really good takeaway for coaches that are tuning in, regardless of their sport. So Ciaran, yourself then, anything you'd be thinking, actually, if to name one thing, this is the strength that I can bring to the program?
I can't let this pass without just adding a couple of comments about Chloe. First of all, I worked with her for a number of years. I think, as I said before, once you have that level of technical competency, okay, and that has to be there, first of all. That's the caveat to everything that comes after that. And she definitely has that. It's about the emotional intelligence. So being self-aware and being aware of the athlete, and I think that's what Chloe understands. Absolutely knows when to push, and then when to ease off. And she has the way when she goes in, because she's very, very successful athletic career, and is well known and can still do a bit of damage when she's on the mat. So already has the instant respect of the athletes that we work with. But after that, I think it's that emotional intelligence piece, when she knows how to extract the best from an athlete. And then the intervention that she makes is always good, which is technically very fun. So I couldn't let that pass without sticking at it. And what am I good? Well, hopefully learning from my mistakes, because I think I've made just about all of them. I remember starting out in my career, I never really had a coach. I had worked, when I was an athlete, I was in different programs and stuff that had a coach, but I never really had a coach looking after the Irish team the time I was starting there. So I remember always thinking, if I had an athlete, that they would have to worry about nothing except working on that. And the coach would do everything else for them. And that was definitely the biggest mistake that I ever did. It was far, like, totally overly prescriptive in coaching in those early years. I knew the answers, so all I had to do was to do what I said and it'd be fine, which is absolutely the quickest way to exit an athlete pathway, because it's about knowing that they're going to make mistakes and training the environment so they can learn from mistakes themselves, rather than just giving people answers all the time. I think that's one area that I've definitely developed in, that would be coming from an overly prescriptive coach to someone who's fully committed to empowering the athletes and framing environments so that they can learn themselves. So definitely leading from behind and trying to promote athlete innovation. Really, I would always say the best technique you're going to have is the one that you come up with. So you frame the learning environment for that athlete so that they will have that micro movement and make it their own, make that technique their own. So just trying to introduce that athlete innovation and clear responsibility in the group, which is harder. It's so much easier just to go, just do this, but you know how to do it. Training a working and training environment so that they'll find out themselves. It's a lot more work and a lot more preparation. But that's definitely the journey that I've went through. I mentioned it already before, Lisa Turner was definitely the canary down the mine for Judo for a number of years, and I made a lot of mistakes because we were going through the journey at the same time, and with no other athletes, and she was the first one. So many firsts, first one to take a Junior Europeans, first one to get a World Cup medal, first one going to the Olympics in January. So there was a lot of firsts there. But since during that journey and since that journey with Lisa, I've definitely developed to be a leader from behind rather than someone who's dictating and preparing.
Brilliant. Do you think, Ciaran, and you talked earlier about the communities that you'd been involved in learning, so obviously you've been involved with other coaches from other sports. Do you get the sense that has changed over the period of time that you've been involved in that beyond your own coaching and, in coaching generally? Are we more empowering than we were maybe 10, 15 years ago now? Or do you think that's not necessarily the case? Actually, every coach was very different at that time, and some coaches were already quite far down that road.
Possibly, maybe I've only built those relationships over the last 10 years, so I don't know if I'd be able to say with any real authority what it was like before then. Chloe touched on it already. 80s and 90s, it was basically, if you could stand up in the showers, you were bluffing. It was just foot to the floor, really, really tough environments. Those who didn't do it had a chance of making it. And we've moved a long way from that. And definitely, within Judo, it's definitely different now. And we're better for it. And careers are longer as a result. Careers are 10 years long now. There's someone with a 10 career with playing out of completely, but very, very rare. Of course, with all the sports science, sports medicine to assist with that, and we are better educated in how we learn and how we develop. So I wouldn't be able to say before those last 10 years when I had been introduced to the coaches in other sports what it was like, but it was definitely the direction in which performance coaching has moved since I've been involved. It's towards empowerment.
And have you got a next step for you, Ciaran, in terms of, obviously you're working on different things with your athletes. Anything you're working on as a coach?
Yes, well, specifics for each athlete. I do want to go and revisit that traumatic growth piece and see where it sits and what we can learn from that. We've already introduced what we call speed bumps in our own program, where we purposely make things more difficult for athletes now. It is to a degree sanitized because we're making it up ourselves. But we don't want people to go through life-changing traumatic experiences just in case they get better at Judo. So, but we do, introduce it. So we know that something works there, but I don't think we understand it properly. So I think I'd like to delve quite a bit deeper into that and see if we can get something that might inform our delivery and our plan going forward.
Good stuff.
Ciaran, just on that, a lot of conversations I would have had with you in the past would have been about athletes that are potentially on the pathway, performance pathway. I know you have very strong principles about the development of those athletes. Would you care to share, things that you think are absolutely necessary for that coaching domain in terms of challenging your athletes and supporting your athletes in the same measure?
I think something that might be a little bit more commonplace now, but when we first introduced it about 6-7 years ago, was the competency-based approach. So there are talent athletes earlier in the pathway, that were 15, 17. To get on to the performance program, we completely removed the competition results, because what we had learned actually is at the cadet level, running at cadet level doesn't necessarily mean that you're going into a senior level. It can many times be a false dawn. And I think that we recognise that that's lazy on our behalf, just to look at competitive benchmarks and say, well, if they win this, then they'll win that. If they hit this kind of this year, I just, that doesn't complete the picture, certainly not for our sport. So that's when that journey started, when we're trying to actually go, what are the competencies that you absolutely have to have? And whilst there are technical, and we've done a lot of work, 2 years of work there on the technical competencies and that trademark development strategy that Chloe and I were involved with. But the behaviours was the most important thing. I mean, if you don't have the behaviours, the honest behaviours, to sustain a career for 10 years, then you're not going to be able to do it. So all the technical work, all the physical competency that you're building up is absolutely worthless if you don't have the performance behaviours that are able to deliver that under pressure repeatedly. So that's what we started looking for. We started looking for, this is what we value most. We value, those performance behaviours, and we set them out in an application and in the language and the vernacular that we use day to day. The athletes are aware of it, and the comes to are aware of what it is that we're looking for. But if we're saying that this is the most important things, then we have to value that. So even if we were getting athletes who weren't winning Irish championships, and we were bringing them under the programme ahead of people who were beating them, but if they were demonstrating the kind of behaviours that we're looking for, then we knew they had a chance. So I think that was a bit of a departure. At the time, I think more sports have moved that way a little bit. We're not looking for quick fixes. We're not looking for cadet and junior results. We're looking for people who are going to compete at more than Olympic level as seniors. So I think that has worked well for us. We've had some people that it hasn't worked so well with, but that's just that's the nature of performance. It's not for everybody. Yeah, I think that covers that.
Brilliant. And as you were speaking there, I could see Chloe nodding away in agreement. Is that something that you echo as well, Chloe, in terms of that approach to the development of athletes in the pathway?
Absolutely. I mean, you can see when you've been involved in a sport for so long, it's something that you see year after year, the most talented kids with amazing skill, but they haven't got the behaviours that you need to stay involved in the sport, and have that longevity. And as a coach, I learned the hard way by spending a lot of time with that type of kid and persuading the kid to get to train, and it just doesn't work. It's you flog on a dead horse, really. So I think by understanding what the behaviours are, and then kind of rewarding athletes for that by giving them your time. And I think, like Ciaran said, by everybody understanding it and acknowledging it throughout the sport, really at every level, it makes coaching easier now. You don't feel like you as a coach, you can. I mean, I've learned over the years, no athlete owes me anything. I do it because I love coaching, and I like giving back to the sport as well, I suppose. But you don't want to waste your time, because your time is precious when you work in a sport that moves along so fast. Yeah.
And I think there you mentioned about the more awareness of that's how we do things here within the association or within the organisation. if more parents understand and are clear about that message, if more athletes are, if more clubs are, then that helps refine the pathway and it becomes very clear what you need to engage in. Yeah.
Kids are getting into sport, and you understand that it has to, the desire to train to do well in a sport has to come from within. So it's simple things like you ensure that they pack their own bag, you know, little things that they understand what's needed to train, and it's what they want to do. Because I think there's a lot of parents as well, not just grassroots levels, all the way through, are the ones who are the driver of the child to do well in the sport, and they'll always drop off when it gets really tough, because I know high performance sport does get tough, and it's the ones who have got those behaviours in judo, they're the only ones who do make it. Yeah,
absolutely. And just to finish off the interview, really interested to see if you have any bits of information, bits of knowledge, something that you would give as a bit of advice to any coach out there who's operating at any level. Question to both of you.
Do this first, Chloe.
I think just you've got to enjoy what you're doing, and I think planning is really important, even if it's on a low level, you know, when you first starting at club level, and understand what you need, you know, what skills you need as a coach. I mean, a lot of in judo have a lot of people get into coaching because they want to be on the mat and they want to coach, and I think it's really important to upskill yourself and understand how to teach the skills, obviously, and organise your mat and how to get the best out of your players, really. So I think if you can, you know, get on any educational coaching courses and stuff like that, that will help you understand, and you know, never be like, I know myself, I'll never know everything. Everybody knows that. In judo specifically, there's so much to learn. So don't think you need to know it all at once. You know, just you know, find an area that you're interested in and really work at that. And you know, don't be shy of asking questions or getting in touch with other coaches and getting advice.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I agree totally with Chloe there. I mean, first and foremost, get equipped, you know, upskill, constantly challenging yourself, seek feedback, seek review, you know, from your athletes, from peers, from someone outside the sport even. I mean, there is always a better way of practicing. And if you're not constantly challenging yourself and trying to get better for your athletes, then you know, you're going to fall off the cliff pretty quick. And I think that's the one thing that's you know your stuff. You know, make sure that you're upskilled and you technically know what you're talking about, and then get feedback. Once you have those things, then it's that move. If I could offer any advice from my own experience, is that move away from that authoritarian, directorial, prescriptive kind of coaching. When you're telling people this is what to do, and it's a much harder piece of work to actually get people through training environments and introduce experiences with that technical, robust technical competency that you have, training environments so that they learn for themselves. It's much harder and it takes much longer, but it's much more sustainable and more rewarding for the athlete.
Fantastic. Guys, that brings our conversation this afternoon to a close. On behalf of Simon and myself and Sport NI, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to talk through. It's been very insightful to get your overview of the sport and pay a few layers back in terms of your own coaching practice and your own thoughts around coaching. So really appreciate that. Wish you wish you both the best of luck going forward with your coaching endeavours, and I will hopefully speak to you both soon.
Thanks very much.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed listening to Ciaran and Chloe. It's fantastic insight from two very experienced coaches. And for me, I guess it was both of them very aware of themselves and their journey as coaches, very aware and self-reflective of their coaching practice, of the environment that they want to create, and the environment which they feel is beneficial to the athletes, and very aware of the athletes' needs, and that's shown through very strongly. And one of the things that was said many times from both coaches was in regards to relationships, and how those relationships are so important. And certainly once you reach a level of competency with your technical and your tactical aspects of coaching, the psychological or the relationship piece becomes very, very important. And I think that stood out very prominently for both Ciaran and Chloe in the discussion. Simon, what did you think? What were your takeaways from the conversation today?
Well, I think I enjoyed the contributions from Chloe and from Ciaran. I absolutely agree with you, Michael, around the relationships thing. Came across really, really strongly as something that they were both had strong views on. I think beyond that, for me, from Chloe, it was a bit around making sense of her own experiences as an athlete. It wasn't just about, this is how I've been coached and this is how I'm going to coach going forward. It was picking out the bits that were actually useful from that, and also taking into consideration the context she works now, the time that she's coaching within now, and what's right for the moment. So I thought that was really great from her. And from Ciaran, when you had asked him about learning opportunities and things he had got involved in around learning, the three things that sort of stood out to me there was the ability just to get a bit of space to lift your head out of your own coaching, which I think a lot of us can probably identify with, about access to community. And we know when coaches often speak to us about learning opportunities that we create, it's very much about getting a chance to chat to other coaches, sometimes beyond what it is that we're actually talking to them about. So definitely that rang a bell with me as well. But lastly, and probably most importantly, from the communities that Ciaran had referred to, just the break in the isolation. He had talked about him being the only coach in the program at that point in time, and how important it was just to get speaking to other people, and sort of identify with some of the challenges that they were seeing themselves. So I think that's an important point. I think it's something that a lot of coaches will recognise, regardless of sort of what level of the pathway they're coaching within, but particularly within high performance and in sports where you might be the only person at that time working on that program. So I think that was nice to hear from Ciaran. So I think in finishing up, just to say, obviously thanks to Ciaran and to Chloe for their time for this episode. Much appreciated. Thank you if you've listened in. Thanks for bearing with us. I know we had a few technical issues just with sound on Ciaran's microphone today, but hopefully you've been able to pick it out. And up next month we have hopefully another really interesting episode in the Curious Coaching podcast, which will be a little bit different from our normal, but we'll hope it'll be something for you to enjoy at that stage. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Curious Coaching is brought to you by Sport Northern Ireland. We hope that this episode has sparked some curiosity for you and your coaching. The future belongs to the curious.